Hello, folks. My name's DC Rockwell, and this is your co-host, Elio Grieco. Welcome to Code and Chaos, a pseudo-random conversation that starts with tech and ends where it ends, about an hour or two later. Tonight, we have a special guest on the show. Elio, would you like to introduce our special guest?
So LinkedIn, not a huge fan, but it does have its upsides, and I've met some really interesting people, and one of those people is Alexandre Blanc. Constantly, he has been posting his signature is connected equals hacked, cloud equals breached. And as someone who remembers when Microsoft pitched that and how it was rejected, is like, no, why would we put all our stuff on your computer? That's a terrible idea. Like, it's been, I don't know, I've loved his posts talking about hacks again and again and again. And this has been a banner year for cloud breaches and hacks. So I wanted to pull him on and get a little more background behind the posts and see what else he has to share, because it's been really fun to watch in a kind of a Schadenfreude-esque type of way.
Awesome. Well, Alexandre Blanc, let's bring you in. How are you? Can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. We see you too.
Technology's actually working. Yay!
Yeah, it's working.
Nice.
All right. So so you did the intro pretty well. So I'm kind of now known about being the cloud renting guy, but there is something in the background, as you said. I mean, it's not free, and my goal is not just to demolish the cloud as it is. The goal is more about building a discussion to enhance the situation overall. We're going to go over that, and why I am doing that is because my own data got stolen in cloud, and not my cloud. It was like credit check companies, like many of us.
Gotcha.
My driver license got in 4 times in big players, and you realize that when it happens, society is not ready to support you on that. So I felt it's unacceptable that the cloud leaks. And you cannot do anything against that. I mean, as an individual, we are nothing. Like, we are quiet. There is nothing we can do. And the society is not backing us as well. And on my side, I've been lucky because my identity has not been stolen, so I can still travel. But it did happen to so many people around, and they cannot even travel. They cannot cross the border. They cannot apply for a loan or anything. So their life is miserable. And that's thanks to the cloud. So, I mean, it happens as well on-prem. But the main stuff right now is because we see, I mean, I'm straight into the topic, but we see that so many organizations that did believe the lie of the cloud marketing that pretended to be cheap, easy, and safe by default. So I did start to communicate about the issue in it, and I'm trying to raise a conversation about what's wrong with it and what we can do to enhance the situation. So, and I've been an IT manager for like 20 plus years, and I've been managing infrastructure, security, data, confidential stuff, been working for government-related, military-related stuff. And there is a scope, and this is all about risk management on all that stuff. But what I see right now in the market is a rush to the cloud, rush in it. And the pandemic just accelerated that stuff. And to the point that this convenience thing did erase any security and confidentiality consideration. So I understand that on the side, there is time to market, there is evolution, innovation that is driven by that. But on another side, you cannot ruin people's lives because, you just want to be fast on the market. So that's a lot of stuff. And actually, I did make a post on LinkedIn. So I heard that you don't like the network. I did not at first, but sadly, if you want to find a job nowadays, you have to be on it. And funny thing, I was no one like 2.5 years ago on that platform. I had like 400 contacts. I was quiet. And I've been, challenged by someone, and I did pick the challenge. Was a marketing guy, and he was always claiming, I'm trying to teach me how to do IT. So I went on his field and say, okay, I gave a challenge to myself saying, a year from now, I'm going to have more followers and more exchange and contact than the company itself. And it did start like that. And what I did not expect is that it grew much faster than expected. I'm more like close to 40,000 followers and 6,000 contacts. And also
Nice.
It did allow me to reach amazing people. I did collaborate with the DoD, DHS. I've been involved in some NIST work about RFCs and standardization thing. Also, I have a very strong technical background. And what happened yesterday, it was quite fun. I did post about, on LinkedIn about the cloud, my favorite topic. So I said, and ooh la la, I should not have done that. I said 2020 was finally the huge cloud failure. And I say that because it has been leaking as hell, like crazy. And it seems like it's just growing. And I am also I'm doing some research, from time to time for project to do example presentation. I do participate in some meetups and other work groups. And I like to take some open buckets and open cloud storage and to show the people what's bad about it.
Yeah.
And I found so many like digital transformation, huge company data, industrial company, huge data. And what I do, because I'm not a bad guy, I don't do illegal stuff. If I found them, and this is like, Googling, advanced Googling search, and I spot that's a cloud storage, so I list it, and I see this is all confidential information. You will not believe, like bank receipts, passports, passwords, cloud credential. it's everything is there.
Yeah.
So when I can even,
I would believe that, because that, to me, that's its own category of breach. Is Amazon and other cloud storage providers have gone ahead and they've made, like you said, they made it easy by default, where it's just open and it's on you as the person using AWS S3 or any other similar system to actually lock it down. And most people just don't. So there's all kinds of super sensitive info just laying there for anyone looking.
It also seems like if you can do this manually, then the attackers they've figured out how to write scripts that can do this all day long, right?
Oh yeah, it's fully automated. You have search engine, and the data is out there already. I mean, if I see it, that means that transnational criminal organization already pulled everything out, because if they access it, first thing they pull everything out. On my side, when I see that, if I manage to identify the owner of the storage, I will actually reach them on LinkedIn. I send them an email stuff. I go to the CEO or high level, because if you speak to engineering or IT people, they will hide it, and there is now a big liability issue. So I go to the CEO, CTO, and I send, here is the link. That's public. Here is the data that you can see from everywhere. So do something. And I don't go after that, because my goal is not to go or, it's just ethical thing. I tell them, I found it. You have to fix that. Now, you spoke about the shared responsibility model. People buy, they subscribe to the cloud, but they don't realize it's their duty. So the shared responsibility model of the cloud stuff, it's a complex thing, actually, because depending on what kind of service you take, you're in charge of more or less of the stack. Like if you take infrastructure as a service, you are in charge of the VM, the server that you run on it, and you have to secure everything. If you take just an application as a service, you are just in charge of securing the account and the access to it. Yet, the global stuff that people don't realize, that the cloud provider are not responsible for anything. They cannot be charged or sued. You cannot sue them, because the term and condition that people accept when they sign, and actually not that many people read what they did accept when they go into that. So from time to time I go, and basically it states that the more you can ask for is just not paying a part of the renting of the months. So basically you don't get money back, you don't get damages for the brand, nothing. You just maybe not going to pay a little amount of what you were supposed to pay. So that's one thing. And the other side of things, it's also the cost that it's usually wrongly estimated. I saw somewhere a stat stating that usually cloud projects cost twice as much as expected within the first year. And you have way to cap resource to say, depending if it's Azure, AWS, you can say, no, I'm not going to spend more than that. And you have different type of resource allocation that you can pull, some to save money, some to help on the rush stuff. But thing is, when organization get like crypto miners in their services, it's those scripts that hackers or criminals push into the system to mine crypto coins or whatever, it's going to take CPU resource. And then because the cloud is set to auto adjust, it's going to grow the resource. and it's going to mine crazy amounts of money. And that also happened not only during hacking or criminal activity. Sometimes if you miswrite your script, I saw, and I did share an article lately about that. Someone did a nice project using cloud backend for AI calculation, and it was going very nice. They got good results, but what they did not see is that the thing was going in an exponential load. And the guy wrote, like, in 3 days, they got like $100,000 US bill. Why they were expecting to spend like $10.
Yeah. And that one, yes, I saw that. I was trying to pull up the link because I saw that. And they had, so this is where cloud and serverless combine. And because most serverless things will only run for, I forget what the time limits are, but it's like 10, 30. It's always less than an hour runtime. So people will think they can just write one function that can run a big batch job, but it doesn't work. It'll keep getting killed. So he split it out and parallelized it into a whole bunch of parallel workers. And it was a spidering type app. And he didn't realize that it was accidentally recursing on itself. And so it'd spider all these links, come back around, and then just exponential growth. And yeah, it was some insane, and he got lucky where he got enough publicity where Google's like, yeah, don't worry about it. We're not going to actually, because he's like, we're done. We don't have that kind of money. The business is over because I made one little mistake. And I remember seeing the back and forth on LinkedIn because he had used a credit card that was like a prepaid $100 credit card.
Yep.
And he had set the actual billing limit to like $10. And there's all these things about the cloud where it's just like, we think you just rather pay us an insane amount of money than actually stop when you told us to stop. So yeah, there's some really interesting hidden dangers.
I hadn't thought of the financial dangers before now. In my industry, I'm a software engineer, and I've worked for many companies that use cloud computing of some sort, mostly Amazon-based stuff, maybe a little Google Cloud here and there. Hardly anybody uses Azure. And, I think everyone's aware. It's in the back of their mind that there are risks to having your data accessed by people who aren't supposed to have access to it. But I've also seen that we, for example, chose the wrong instance size for our application, and we ended up charging tens of thousands of dollars. And we were working for companies that were making millions of dollars, so they didn't really have to, it wasn't that big of a deal. The CFO probably wasn't super happy about it, but, we all kept our jobs and life went on as normal. But if you were a smaller business and, you saved up $50,000 to launch your business, that could be the end of your business. And I never considered that before.
Yeah. And you raised something about the financial side of things that organizations don't see. That yes, you save on the infrastructure cost because then you pay as you go, but there is a cash flow consideration, like especially during the pandemic side. I mean, most of the organization didn't actually consider if you have a cash flow issue and you are out of cash for a month and you don't pay, let's say the limit, I think it's usually 90 days, after which the cloud provider is going to wipe your data.
Oh wow!
So what and the backup side of things is also the customer responsibility. So you should have a copy of your data and asset locally. So financial side, there is the extra cost that it can reach, but also the fact that what happens if you are out of cash flow. I mean, if you have a local infrastructure, something you own, you can always pause it, and then you can resume. But if your whole data stack is online and you don't pay for it, it gets wiped. There is nothing left.
So my background, when I first, was doing serious web engineering, I was tasked with pulling a server off of a shelf, formatting it, putting BSD on it, getting it all configured locally, then putting it into a car, driving it down to a data center, having to do biometrics to get in, walking past a big control room full of people who are supposedly watching these monitors for threats and things like that, specifically for us, going into a big old server room with lots of cameras watching me with a cart and pushing that cart with a monitor on it, down there, pushing it into the right rack. And you would be followed by a person, and then that person would unlock the particular rack you're supposed to have access to. And then they would leave you. They leave you. And those server rooms were pretty loud. was an exciting place to be. And you would then put the server in, hook it up the way you need to, and boot it up, make sure everything is working. And if we didn't pay our bill, I've never had the experience of not paying my bill in that kind of a situation. And so I imagine that they just simply cut off the internet to it, but it's still going to exist in that rack. I don't imagine they're going to take my server out of the rack and go throw it through some industrial shredder and be like, that's it. Sorry, buddy. It's been 90 days, like
I think you have some like delays, like legally on the contract, stating that maybe the ownership of the asset, if you didn't, respond to the call and you didn't come to pick up or clear the stuff, could be taken away. But this is still something. I mean, it's not going to disappear. Like cloud side of thing, it's highly automated. It's automated for the customer, but it's automated from the infrastructure side as well. So, I mean, but I understand as well, because the task you described, it has been part of my job as well. I mean, driving with the server, putting that in co-location stuff, getting the fiber and everything. That's something I know. Now, I understand that if you want to just turn a VM on to do a test project, you want to click, and in the cloud, if you do that, click, 5 minutes, you get your VM up. You don't have to bother anybody. So you can understand the need of that. But at the same time, it's not the same scope if it's testing something, like a lab with just developing an application. And when you have to cover everything with PII protection, governance of the data, and handling public data and security on the whole thing. So, and what did happen when you had your own machine, basically, it will not come connected straight on the internet. Like, I used to compare on-prem and cloud. And on-prem, I mean, co-location is something as well, what you just described. It doesn't come wide open. You have to open the firewall port. You have to set it up so you can actually route your stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not the beginner stuff that can happen. So you need people with skills to do it. I don't say it's more secure. I say that it's more complicated to set up and get it running, compared to the cloud stuff where anyone can put a credit card, take the stuff, it doesn't work, remove all the security, it's connected, and then leave it like that. So, and that's what we see from the bucket leak side of things. That's one of my issues. Yeah. Now, there is also something about the data ownership and the control of the stack. I mean, computer network is OSI layers. You get the hardware layer, the data connection and application layer and stuff. When you go to the cloud, it's someone else's computer. So you only see what the cloud platform is showing you. And I've got a bunch of friends working and discussing this topic all the time about knowing what happened behind. And you cannot know. And that discussion, that post that went nuts on LinkedIn, people blaming me. I said, you have control. Well, okay, you have a nice web interface, which is a front end, which has been developed by web developers that give you access to features that show you something. And you spoke about IoT stuff like the mute button on smart speaker and stuff. Yeah. And people really believe that when they mute the stuff, it's actually cutting the microphone. That's funny.
That's hilarious.
But when you think about that button, it's just turning on a LED and making the thing not reacting, but it's still recording. So the thing is, it's just a front end. And unless you control the back end, you have no idea. So then the guys in the discussion say, but you can trust much more people in a data center like Microsoft or Azure or AWS or whatever, because they know what they do and you have a contract. Yes, they have a contract, but they are still humans. And we know that in the chain of security, if you remember, I don't know if you remember that hack about iCloud, and it was called the fappening, where all the celebrity private pictures went out. How it did happen? Someone went, gave some money to a low technician in an Apple store, because back then every technician in Apple store had full access to any iCloud account just to maintain and support the device. And these guys are paid the lowest wage, So if you come with that guy, and this guy had the key back then to everything, every iCloud. So they went in, 50K, 100K, who cares at this point? Because you will have access to everything. So that's the human factor. And you can, attacker, criminal, they will always find a weak one. And there are so many ways to put pressure on someone. Now, again, this is about security control process. You got regulation on that stuff, and you got external audit, which the cloud guys get more and more.
Mhm.
But it did still allow abuse from inside. And one of the points that people don't realize is, yes, I have control. I say, no, you don't really know what happened in the back. So
Yeah.
I understand. It's about, because then they say, yeah, but on-prem, it's the same. It's your employee. Do you trust your employee? Yeah, I agree. It's a risk assessment. Now, when you hire someone and you have visibility on your stack, you kind of, have the gut and the trust. When it's a cloud provider, you don't know which country the data is actually replicated in, because it's in the term and condition. They say, we reserve the right to access the data so we can actually achieve the replication needed to operation, blah, 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 blah. In the end, it means we can read your data. This is what it says. So sure, it's for the meaning of replicating the stuff. Okay, fine. So what happened now is that I have so many ways to steal your data without you knowing it. And the funny part is that the cloud provider, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, are technology companies. They are. Yeah. They build technology, okay? And people using the cloud to distribute application, they are also technology companies. And what happened is that we see that every year on the market, Google, AWS, and all of them, they do buy companies that grow, and they integrate them in their services. And nowadays, you barely see any company that can go above them, because before they have a chance to reach a size that can compete, they get purchased. Okay?
It's like having signed up to participate in espionage. Like, go ahead, look through all our stuff. Take all our trade secrets.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if you saw, Amazon did offer in the US the Echo stuff for Alexa for all university network. It was for the dorm rooms and the office, library, and stuff. What happened there? To me, that's a strategical intelligence spying program, because where Facebook was born in a university as a research project, okay, and everything like that. So now, if you put 24/7 recording device in this spot, you will get access to this creativity before it has a chance to even reach the market. And these guys have enough resource to make it happen before it's born. So nowadays, there is zero chance for innovation for any organization in the world to go above the masters of the big one. I mean, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and stuff. Because these guys, they will know that your idea is the right one before you even have a chance to realize. So if you think about that idea, okay, there is a legal standpoint. I mean, no, they're not going to do it. Okay, right, never.
Well, I mean, I think that right there, I know it's a conspiracy theory because we don't have actual access to knowing.
Yes.
But I have had way too many experiences where I have not searched anything on a particular subject, but I have had a conversation out loud around my Alexa device or around my phone, and I've ended up getting advertisements for that subject within minutes, So I'm not sure if I believe that they're not, they're just being responsible with that.
Well, just look, and I mean, that's the topic that comes and goes online for many years. And they say, no, it's a predictive analysis, AI stuff. We know your behavior online. And so it was obvious that with the same range of population, you were about to have that behavior because actually you've been programmed by that. This is advanced marketing. So that's one side of it. But then, okay, that's marketing. Now you go to Google News and you look for how many people got caught in criminal activity, and federal agencies or anyone got helped by the recording of the actual smart device. So the recording of the smart device or the smart speaker did help the legal investigation to stop someone beating his wife or violence at home or stuff like that. So, okay, great. It has been helping to stop something that is something bad. But at the same time, it's a proof that he was spying.
Right.
Because
exactly.
they pulled the record. So and obviously the guy who was doing bad stuff didn't ask the device to record.
Obviously. So, and there's also incidents, and I think we covered this in a previous episode, where they had a thermostat that they had not disclosed there was a microphone in it. And then that was a big story a few years ago where it's like, oh, this little thermostat I don't know why a thermostat needs a microphone. That was not part of, it wasn't stated anywhere. And they did a teardown. They're like, why is there a microphone here? And I guess ostensibly so they could add voice integration later. But if you're buying an IoT device and you don't know it can listen, that's a problem. It makes it even more insidious. Even as a conscious consumer, you can't be like, wait a minute, like, let me not buy the one with the mic. So there was a thing I was trying to pull up that I can't remember the name right now, but there is actually a way to protect yourself if you have these little smart surveillance devices. They made a little Raspberry Pi thing that sits on top of like an Alexa or a Google Home or whatever, and it plays white noise, and it's right on top of there. So it's like it just covers all the other sound coming in, and then it has a wake word that you set to whatever you want, and it shuts up, stops playing the white noise, plays the activation word, and then it lets you temporarily grab access. So for those people that want to shoot the difference and they want to have some semblance of privacy but still have a voice assistant, there are some little there's some ways to lock it down a little better and not have to have that constant surveillance aspect.
But look at how many of those devices you'd have to buy now. I'd have to have one for my phone, one for my Alexa, one for my computer, one for everything. And then on top of that, isn't it absurd that that's the level we have to go to in order to protect ourselves from these companies that are just harvesting our data and then storing them on servers that, Alexander, you've made pretty clear that it's not entirely secure to be putting our data there. I mean, I guess, is that even fair to say? Is there anywhere secure now on the internet that you can store data, even if you are co-locating?
You say it on the internet, and you know what I say all the time, connected equal hacked. So if you want something really secure, it should be like air gapped. And even if it's air gapped, you saw all this proof of concept of like many approaches to steal data, like through microphone, through vibrating. Even one of the latest one that was pretty amazing was they got tweaked a RAM memory chip to generate 2.4 gigahertz signal,
attack.
which was like some kind of Wi-Fi through the RAM chip. So,
and that guy out of Ben Gurion University, he has 20 of those, 20 different side channels from one research team. I've seen, I mean, it's been an amazing last 3 years of side channel research. So, and the old Tempest attack that everyone used to freak out about, like van parked down the street looking at your monitor, that's been open source. There's 2 different repos on GitHub that you can grab an SDR and do the Tempest attack yourself. So, The thing I have a question I want to focus on a little bit is, so you mentioned putting all this stuff on the cloud, and the number of attacks you mentioned is rising. And first of all, I'm curious about your thoughts. It feels to me, without doing like a detailed mathematical analysis, that we're looking at exponential growth here.
It's actually growing crazy. And there are some solutions because we cannot get back out of the cloud. That's a future, I understand, because all the connectivity goes to the cloud and there is the flexibility there. Now, there are some avenues to explore. Something is called like confidential computing. So one thing is like basically you send some workloads in a encrypted blob that run as a computer encrypted in the machine, and you keep the control on the I/O basically, and you keep the encryption key on your side. So that's one of the projects. But as you can guess, this is a huge overhead, the computation requirement, power, because you have all the encryption stack and you cannot get access to the fast capabilities of the CPU and stuff because it's encrypted. So then it makes the cloud like less interesting because you lose that. Now, another thing is private cloud. Private cloud, you own the stack, it's dedicated to you. That's better. Because basically you are supposed to have a whole OSI layer for you. It's like renting hardware, kind of. Yet you should be able to audit the stack as well. Get someone or even a third party to see who is accessing what. Because one of the main thing in the cloud, and when we say the cloud, it's everything, like software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and everything. The issue is when you're in the cloud, they refer as public cloud, which is a shared infrastructure. And when you have a shared infrastructure, it means that the server, the back end, is shared. And you spoke about side channel attacks. Basically, this little trick to extract memory, CPU cache, or the RAM.
Yeah.
And basically, if you have many tenants on the same hardware, data can leak between the tenants. It's low chance of it to happen, but yet it can happen. So it means that, to me, no confidential or sensitive information can go in the cloud. It's not doable. So then you get the communication about U.S. government going into Gov Cloud with Microsoft, and they say, yeah, it's Azure Cloud. But thing is, it's not Azure. It's the Azure stack, but it's a dedicated stack. It's not the public Azure stuff. So marketing side of things, again, misleading. Sure, it's Azure. Yeah, it's Azure feature, but it's not Azure Cloud. It's a dedicated stack on which they have basically Hyper-V and all the Azure feature for them. And also, this is government-cleared people managing the physical access to the infrastructure, even if it's Microsoft-rented kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I think it's, yeah.
I have a threat dynamics question, a threat economics question. And I'm curious. So one of the things I see about the cloud is putting all the data in one place increases the incentive to attack that place. It's like a bank. I could go try to rob everyone's house, but every time I try to break in, I'm only going to get a small reward and I'm taking high risk. So by putting everything in one place, like in a bank vault, like it's harder to break in, but if I do, I get all the money. So there's a lot higher incentive. So my question to you is, I think cloud is the same thing. Putting all the data in one place makes it much more enticing to attack. So does private cloud, does that adequately address that incentive?
Well, private cloud, if you have only one private cloud in one location, you have the same risk. Then you have the responsibility as a customer. And this is the same in the public cloud. It's the customer responsibility to make sure they have replication across what they call, depending on the cloud provider, a viability zone or area, geographical zone. And it's just usually on the public cloud side, it's a checkbox one, and then you double the price because you get it replicated, but you pay double price.
Yeah.
If it's about private cloud, you need to have multiple data centers, you need the connectivity between, and you have to make sure that you have two of them and the replication in place. So that risk assessment is also on the customer cost. So that's something. But fact is, you don't get to build this feature nowadays on yourself. I mean, I host my own stack. I host my website. I run Proxmox machine, HA, and stuff. But if you are an organization that is not in IT and you need to go with the technological stack and you need to be connected, especially during the pandemic, well, you have not many options. You cannot, buy a private cloud, because then this is the same as buying your own infrastructure. You don't have the skills. So basically, you do with a cloud service provider, CSP, that you put in charge of your digital transformation. And they don't have many options, because this is the way it goes. Now, issue is that when these CSPs let either the customer open the access control to the data, or themselves, they don't set it properly, because some I found are the digital transformation specialists and their buckets were wide open. So that's pretty scary, because you would rely on these guys to do things right, and they don't. So the likelihood of being hacked in the cloud vs on-prem is lower from a technical standpoint, because for sure the cloud infrastructure is top cutting edge technology, super secured and everything. The problem is the implementation and the configuration. And that's, you need people with skills, and you also need to adjust to the change, because something is different in the cloud is that you don't get to choose when the upgrades happen or the change of the interface. So your teams have to actually feel the beat of the cloud provider, adjust to the change. If some online services is discontinued, you will get another. I did experiment that. I have VDS on the cloud provider. I did complain about that, and they wrote an email. Oh, by the way, 3 months from now, and we're gonna cut down the service. I don't see myself in the video. I guess it's like
Yeah,
that.
no,
Yeah, this
we're having
Do you
some.
hear me?
This is a great, yeah, we can hear you. This is a great segue, though, to another point about the cloud is the internet. There's the fallacies of distributed systems. And one of those fallacies is the network is always available. The network never has errors. And we're doing this cross country right now.
Yeah.
And by moving everything off premises onto the cloud, like you've just introduced at least one more single point of failure. So like that's the thing that's always bothered me as an engineer is like, no, I want the computation. I want as much stuff happening right next to me as possible, because the farther away it is, the less ability I have to make sure it stays running and the more things that can go wrong.
Well, maybe so, but I think Alexander made a very strong point, which is that you're also taking on the responsibility of hosting that properly, hosting that securely, and taking on you have to take on the responsibility of being your own knock, basically. And, I worked for a medical company where we dealt with, private health information, PHI. And, that we had a lot of extra responsibilities for those servers that were actually co-located. We had our own knock, and they had to actually monitor these couple of servers that were holding, the PHI, whereas the rest of it was taken care of by Amazon, basically, whatever the the cloud service provider was.
Let's take a hypothetical example. If you went to a cloud-based EMR system to review patient records, and someone went into surgery, and then the internet failed, and you couldn't find out, do they need more or less of a blood thinner? How much, what's the dosage? What other things? If you couldn't get critical information, what type of blood do we need to transfuse if they need another transfusion? That could be fatal. And so going to something that's purely in cloud can be and I'm saying this is hypothetical. I wish I could share the whole truth. This is less hypothetical than I'm saying. You know what
is also fatal though? Is hackers getting into your hospital and installing ransomware on all of your computers. I mean, it seems to me like there's a trade-off between these two. And when we look around at what's the bigger problem, is the bigger problem that the hospitals lose internet connectivity during a critical moment, or is the bigger problem that we have widespread security problems at every hospital? That being able to hire top class security staff that want to work within a hospital at all the thousands and thousands of hospitals across, just the United States and Canada as well. It's how do you find all that staff when there's a nursing shortage,
I'm going to toss that to Alexander, see if he has thoughts.
Yeah. The shortage of skilled people is true on the infrastructure side of thing, but it's also true on the cloud side of things. So, I understand that you cannot manage your on-prem stuff, but then you're going to drop that task to CSP, then you fall under HIPAA regulation for the hospital medical staff. Then you need skilled organization to manage that too. So two things, you get that risk about the connectivity that you may lose at any time. So part of the risk assessment, you should have redundancy, like full redundancy and path diversity on your connectivity. Although I'm not sure that all hospitals actually have it.
Yeah.
They have like SLAs and insurance and stuff, but they don't have diversity on the physical, which they should, because if this is that critical, and it is nowadays, that's one thing. Now, also having your operation in the cloud partially on the service provider, you still have the client side of things locally. You still have a local network. You still have clients. Even if you have all your operation in the cloud, all your workstation get encrypted by a ransomware, you're not in a better position that you will. Yeah, sure, the server may be safe, but honestly, right now, one of the evolution of the ransomware is lateral move and cloud move, targeting backups and online infrastructure replication to be destroyed as well. And when you get a virus or something running as you on the client side of things, it has the same rights as you. So basically, on your credential, your access to the infrastructure. So it doesn't really change the problem. That's one thing. What changes is that you get a bigger attack surface because you got two infrastructure to protect with two very different skill sets. The cloud skill, and it's role-based access control and all these things, is a totally different beast as what you have on-prem. So you need highest skills on-prem to secure your client side, and that's not going to go away. People need to type on keyboards. So you need to secure that stuff. And then you also need skilled people online. So that's twice the bill. So in that saving cost, you need to consider that thing. But you don't have to, you cannot escape that cloud thing. So you will need to have resource. You need cloud service provider, but you need also cyber security service provider to own that task. And there is one big move that's happening right now, slowly but painfully, is the arrival of zero trust. And you have these new tools, about zero trust access control, basically, which go both on-prem and in the cloud to unify the access control between both infrastructure. And that's good because if you've been working a little bit on zero, that's attribute-based authentication thing. We go a bit away from the cloud, but it's still tied to the cloud security thing. And what happened is that it's very more difficult to pass a lateral move through zero trust infrastructure because all the attributes that you need to access a resource are not be met by the attacker. When I say attribute, it's machine certificate, login, password, digital card authentication, but also geolocation and sometimes browser signature or footprint. And the more advanced and the more attributes you use on your zero trust implementation, the less likely you're going to be breached and move. So because we cannot escape the cloud right now, we have to do it right. And yet it doesn't fix the fact that someone else can access your cloud data. That's a whole other story. And as I said before, we need confidential computing in place. But right now, it's not there. And right now, you are barely going to find on-prem solution because most of the big cloud providers were also the big software distributor and editor. So they don't make it available. The new solution are only online. And that's a big issue. So we are in I said, highest risk window right now because we have legacy infrastructure on site that need to be secured. We have cloud solution that is not really secure right now. Oh, I can see my haters jump on the chair. So it can be secure. You can do it right. Yeah. Some do it right. Okay, they do it. They do not whole leak. I think they did actually. But so let's assume that they don't whole leak. And they do it right. You're not gonna find these smart guy for you, and you need to implement solutions. So I switched. I took a new job recently, and I work for a cybersecurity company as well. And one of my goal in that position is actually to bring advice and tools for small organization. Big organization too, but to allow them to highlight these issues, and they can actually take decision being aware of the challenge. Because I'm not selling cloud, I'm not selling a magical box. Actually, we take any solution that allow to the gap, and that's the challenge of today. There is no magical stuff, and they blame me always on you cannot do that on-prem, and I know we can do that on-prem because we have skills shortage for prem management, and because the server market is evolving, technology is changing, and it's not available. So big challenge right now with the cloud. And I'm going to continue to share about cloud equal leak and connected equal hacked because decision makers must consider when they do start a project that they have to work on security side of things. It's not about delivery. It's not about time to market. I know we have to serve a business role, as you said at the beginning. You need the business. You have to fit the business needs. But right now, the impact on society is so huge that we can't accept to ignore the security side of things. So the whole point of my sharing on LinkedIn, and thankfully I have a growing audience, and that is decision-making people should ask the right question to their teams. Then teams have to deal with it. find solution. There are technical solutions. They have to be responsible for that. And we also need to fix that responsibility thing. It's coming, you see fines about leak and breaches, but we need more of this, because if there is no incentive on that side, no one is going to handle that. If you have no risk, why would you spend time and resource on something that is not going to risk you anything? Who cares? They all leak. Who cares?
Yeah.
Well,
so that's my fight.
That's my main point here, which is it sounds if cloud equals leaked and connected equals hacked, then we don't have any great solutions right now for a business to be able to say with confidence to their customers that we are securely storing your data. That just doesn't exist right now as a concept. And because if that's the problem, is if we could co-locate our own servers, or we could locate them right here on premises, and we could hire the best security officers in the world to come and work for us, and yet that still means that we're going to get hacked. What's the point? Why don't we just go into the cloud? And then if the cloud's going to get hacked, then what's the point? Why do we even try to protect data at all? And so for me, this leads me back to thinking, the real problem here is anonymity on the internet. It's that we need strong digital identity for those people who are connecting to these computers. So this way we can prevent hacks in the first place. We can, or at least have accountability for those who are connecting to a secure system without being able to mask everybody with VPNs and things like that. But that also brings up other problems, like what about journalists? What about whistleblowers? What about, the folks that, they would be persecuted by their government for sharing information about human atrocities? How do we solve this problem without strong digital identity? And it doesn't seem like you can. It seems like as long as if something can be connected to the internet in any way, and even then you were saying even air gapping is starting to become a non-viable, maybe it's research based right now, it's experimental, but eventually it'll go mainstream that people will find ways to be able to bridge the air gaps. And that means that every computer will be compromised, or at least from a security standpoint, you have to assume that every computer is already compromised. Is that just like how we have to live from now on? Is just thinking that private data is just not a thing. Our health records are going to be accessed by other people. Our tax records will be accessed by other people. Political dissidents, they are going to be jailed, and they are going to be executed, and we don't have any that's just where we are going as a race.
That's exactly the point I was trying to raise, and I think we need innovation right now. We need to think about it, because status quo right now is not acceptable. We're in a wrong situation, and I can't believe, following all the innovation we see, that we cannot find a suitable solution to this problem. And the cloud is growing on its side, but it's not enhancing. It's not fixing the issue. So that was the whole point of my share. Can we think about ways to address the issue? I mean, confidential computing is going to come, one thing. Okay, cool, could be a solution. And also, when we speak about security, I mean, some solution exists, but then it destroys the usability, and we don't have market acceptance of it, because users don't want to do that. And there is also a shift, and that's a natural thing as well in the short, middle term that we see, like new generation are used to convenience. And basically, they don't see the issue with privacy invasion because they've been raised into such watching that they don't get the point and the risk of it. Now, because they don't realize, I mean, we fall back to the big marketing manipulation and stuff. I mean, this is, targeted, efficient marketing, and this is adapted to behavior, but this is all tied to that. This is about market control, convincing people to do stuff, and there is no limit. I mean, this is neurologic programming. When you get ICE analysis, when you watch a web page, all this stuff, and this technology is crazy. It's out there. So, what can we find as a trade-off between the need of confidentiality and, as you said, attribution and non-repudiation of the task of people who connect and what happens. So in my mind, I see maybe an evolution, which is like government-based services on a fully authenticated network with, we had passports. So the same passport should lead to actual online identity with a private key, something you cannot forge. I mean, at least to be
non-trivial,
to evolve and be patched according to because nothing is like unhackable. Keep in mind Titanic, and but something like that, where when you need to access online identity, official government work, you will have some very advanced control, zero trust stuff, which is less convenient but give you access to stuff. Or you go in person, but during the pandemic, we see that it's not really efficient nowadays. And the global internet for less risky data, and it's about classification and governance of data as well. So there is something on this side right now, but as you said, medical data is still going through the regular internet and going to the regular cloud stuff. And that, I think, should not happen this way. I mean, you should have mandatory confidential computing with strong authentication and zero trust for all sensitive data. And on the society side, we need to allow an individual to fight back. I mean, if your identity is stolen, we should have a way to recover that. And I don't think biometric is the right thing to do. And maybe multi-biometric or something, but it has been proven many times that, we can do fake fingerprint. I mean, I did fool a phone, an iPhone with a tape, desktop tape on the fingerprint at first. So, and the issue with biometric is stick factor. It's not changing.
Yeah, non-cancelable.
So, technology evolved. And technology evolved, gets stronger, more able to reproduce that, while that authentication is static. So it's going to be totally unreliable.
So I have a question. You mentioned... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
You mentioned zero trust, and
go ahead.
I've been, for the last 5 to 10 years, I've been looking at decentralized technology, and I've been an enthusiast since like back in the days when Publius, that never came to market, but that was a really cool research project called Publius that they decided to shut down. Then Freenet actually made that a reality. And there's a newer crop within the last 5 years of like IPFS, NewNet has fired back up. There's MadeSafe. There's a whole slew.
Yes.
Plan Systems is really cool. The whole slew of things. So there's a very different way with these decentralized systems of moving and taking care of data. And I'm curious if you've been following the space as well, and what your thoughts are and how that applies to the problems we've been talking about.
Yeah. I actually love that idea of decentralized system. We should not have single or 3 or 5 big corporations owning the core of the system. That should be agnostic. And close edge computing. I run a small social network account on Join Diaspora or Diaspora. It's like a Facebook but open source stuff. And that thing is peer-to-peer network. Anyone can run his pod. The authentication is federated. And basically, if you have an account on one pod, you can still identify and cross-connect with the other ones. And you can manage to your own. You have replication. And it doesn't matter where you are. That thing is running on shared resources. So this kind of distributed computing. And I think this approach is right. And that will be a right way to move out from the cloud. The cloud will play a role. I mean, someone can rent computing resource in the cloud to boost work, meshing network or whatever. But the feature, functionality, data will not be on that stack, just on application that you run and own. That's something I really learned. It will be, distributed, reliable. Now, as you said, the technology did exist. It still exists, like IPFS and stuff. But there is also threat control. I mean, national security consideration. Because when you go into that stuff, it's pretty much like Tor network and these kind of networks. You have national security in place. How do you protect? This is also the balance between privacy and security and encryption. I mean, I'm a strong defender of privacy, but one of my contacts is working a lot against child abuse. And I understand that she wants backdoor because she doesn't want child abuse to spread, and it's spreading a lot. So what we do, I'm really balanced. I want privacy and I want security as well. So it's a permanent fight, kind of, between the two. And this is why I share on LinkedIn. This is why so many people don't like it. But the whole goal is, I hope, because alone I don't have a solution. I'm not that genius. Maybe Elon Musk has an idea, but I mean, I think out of the discussion, we're gonna come to something that's gonna be suitable. But for sure, the current situation is yes, all quiet now.
Yeah. Sorry, we're having some network issues, or I'm not sure. I think it might be CPU on your side, but we are hearing you. It's just coming through a little bit with some glitches.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say.
No worries.
I had one other question to ask. I'm trying to see if the connection's stabilized there. But yeah, once again, I mean, it's so appropriate. See, this is what we get. We're not singing the praises of the cloud, so the cloud is punishing us and ruining our stream. So.
Yeah, it's listening. Our Alexas all heard us talking smack. And,
they're like, I got something for you. So yeah, I would love to go into that at some point, a deeper, like a whole episode, because I've been studying that for a while. And there's one key thing that I keep coming back to, which you mentioned, privacy versus the public good and law enforcement. And one thing that I keep coming back to is this concept of knowledge horizons. And I feel like any modern system, you shouldn't be, if any one person can see all the stuff, that's really bad, because there's always a group of people. If you look at like the Taliban and stuff, and I think it was the Taliban or Al-Qaeda blew up, there are those ancient religious statues carved into the side of mountains that had been there for 1,000, 2,000 plus years. Just incredible works of human ingenuity, like really world treasures. And they shoved a whole bunch of C4 in there and blew them up. And like that, to me, that just shows you will have groups. There will always be multiple groups that are willing to do whatever it takes, commit whatever crimes necessary to fully eradicate other groups and eradicate other knowledge. So if you were dumb enough to build the system that unified all of humanity's knowledge so everyone could see everything, you're going to end up with least common denominator. You're going to end up with the least interesting knowledge, because everyone will eradicate. And I'm, again, these are groups that they will track down where the person who posted that knowledge actually lives and commit physical violence, like kinetic strike, as we call it in the industry, against them. And so you need a system that fundamentally has knowledge horizons where each person can see out to a horizon of, here's the stuff I have, and I can see all my data, obviously. And then here's the friends I have, and I can see some of the data they've allowed me to see, some the stuff they've shared, and then maybe a few more links past that. I can't see all the way out to the whole edge of the network. I can only see out so far to this little horizon. And the other area where I think that's really important is we've seen the legal system. We've seen people, one guy got jailed in a foreign country recently. I think TripAdvisor kind of, sort of, I wouldn't say came to his aid, but he posted a bad review of this hotel overseas, and they jailed him. And so TripAdvisor's like, we're going to at least put an annotation that if you go to this hotel and you say bad things, you might end up in a prison overseas. And that's the most extreme example. But we've seen a ton of cases where people just sharing their experiences, saying, look, it wasn't very good. I ate at this restaurant. I stayed at this hotel. It was dirty. It's not good. And then people using the law, because you don't have to actually win a lawsuit to win. I can file a frivolous lawsuit, and if I have enough money and lawyers on staff, I can just file you into submission. And you're like, oh, I'm not going to spend $20,000 hiring legal counsel to keep my 2-star review of your restaurant up. That's just, most people aren't going to do that. So you need that knowledge horizon where I can share among my friends and the people I know, here's what I think of these restaurants, of these resources, and the company doesn't need to know that even exists. There's some really severe disadvantages to them knowing that exists, and ways for abuse that, like, they just shouldn't even see it.
So I'm interested in wrapping up our conversation with a little bit of guidance on if folks are listening out there and they're in a position to, or rather they have a strong interest in maybe taking part in the solution to these problems. What kinds of ideas, where should where should they direct their efforts? So, for example, I feel like, after this conversation, security departments are really just a Band-Aid on the problem. And we're really just trying to, we know that we're going to have these people who are going to be attacking us, and they're trying to defend us against the problem. But, what can we do about, I'm not sure even how to frame the question right. How do we make this state better? Because I agree with you. I think that this is an unacceptable status quo, that if we have computers in the cloud and we know that they're going to be compromised, if we have computers in a co-location and we know they're going to be compromised, if we have computers on premises and we know they're going to be compromised, something is very wrong, and we need to solve, or at least identify, the root of this problem. And I hear a lot of different ideas, being floated around, especially in this conversation. Things like centralization could be one of the main problems. Another problem can be weak digital identity. Another problem could be knowledge horizons. Is it that we really are at a point where we don't have a full grasp on what exactly the problem is, and we need to do more research and thinking in that direction so we can know how to pressure maybe the government, or pressure, companies in some sort of way to do, to have an economic incentive to do the right thing? What can be said to those out there who are just as appalled by this state as I think all of us are? What can we say to them if they want to put their efforts toward the solution? Now, I'll throw that to Alex.
Easy question, right?
You hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah. So I think we need to make sure, there is the non-repudiation requirement on the side, and there is a privacy requirement on the side. I like the limited horizon thing you spoke about, and it's kind of community-based approach and well-being and watching, which I like. It's kind of really close to the open source stuff that we see, and this is something I like as well. Relying on the others to watch and care. Obviously, that thing should be kind of randomized, because then you're going to have some clusters of potentially nasty ones in the system that can also create a bias on it. But yeah, something around this idea. And obviously, we need distributed and computing and resources. We cannot have this single point of failure as we have right now, and the full power in a very small amount of entities. I know why it's in place like that. I understand that there is a data collection, national interest and stuff, but maybe in the long run, we need to change that. Right now, for people having to kick in projects, sadly, there is not many options aside of applying best practices of the security side of things. But don't overlook it. Don't avoid or think it's going to happen to someone else. If you apply all the best practices that are right now on the market, like, security, multi-factor encryption and everything, the likelihood of a breach is going to be much, much lower than what it is right now. All the breaches and share and the cloud leak I share, and sometime on-prem as well, is more than 90% configuration issue. So we need accountability, because with accountability and best practices, we're going to drop 90% of these issues. And this is my hope when I share all of this. And sadly, I think we need regulation with fines, because right now, hit where it's painful, and somehow it should be proportional to the side. Because when we see player that get fined that are reduced compared to their budget, it's just like buying toner for the printer to them. That's the cost of doing business, kind of. It's not meaningful. So if you betray voluntarily, you abuse, or you don't do the best stuff, you should have a meaningful impact on the business.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, not allowed to operate. I mean, I know about jobs, but this is also about victims. So we need strong action outside until we have a system that is smart built enough to avoid these issues. But we don't have it yet. So right now, we need accountability, responsibility. The current model where cloud provider drop the responsibility and customer cannot be sued because didn't know whatever, or the fine are ridiculously low. It doesn't help. So right now, strong accountability and responsibility enforcement as a first step. Best practices. Yes, it's going to slow down some business because we need skill. Fine, then train your staff. You don't have to, you don't need to look for new staff. Train your people, and they can do the job. So that's a good way to go. I mean, that's 90% of the breaches right now. Then that will leave plenty of time and resource to build something stronger, hopefully.
So accountability and also, better trained staff. And really, it comes down to accountability, I think, ultimately. You need to have company leaders who are accountable for making sure that they're staffing the right kind of security-minded people, to make sure that they are trained the right way and that they're configuring their software and their databases and their firewalls and their network rules all correctly. It seemed to me like accountability in terms of fines, a fine could be considered a cost of doing business. I mean, even if it was a 20% fine, somebody could say, you know what, we're still making 80% of our money. One of the more interesting ways I've heard of combating that is to go after their insurability and to essentially say, have a standard that says that you must reach this level of security. You must reach this level of competence, or else you are uninsurable. And if you do get sued, we need some sort of way of being able to bypass these, these protections that C corps and other kinds of corporate structures allow to protect the individuals in the board, the individuals at the tops of these companies from being directly impacted. They can just go, okay, well, you know what, the business is bankrupt, but all of us can keep on, we all get to keep all of our own stuff. And so a combination of hitting them where they can be insurable, like essentially saying that all of these folks at the tops of these companies are directly responsible for these breaches, that if something happens on your watch, you could lose your home, you could lose your cars, you could lose your bank, the money in your bank account. And the only way that you can protect yourself against that is insurance. But the only way to get that insurance is to be able to prove that you actually have a certain level of competence in that you are doing everything reasonable in order to prevent, breaches and things like that. Does that make sense?
There's one other
reasonable
thing.
To you?
Yeah,
that sounds spot on. And there's one other thing I'd like to add, though. You mentioned training, Alexander. I think that retention, like I've worked at one of the biggest tech companies. I won't name it, but that team was over 15 years old. The most senior person on the team was around 2 years. There's a lot of churn in the tech industry. And so that's part of the problem and that maybe that is the insurance thing is the thing to go after is C-suite and everything below. You get in there, you make some decisions, you save a whole bunch of money up front by not going the extra mile on security. And then you move to the next job in a year or two. And then the next guy comes in and everything falls apart and everything explodes and catches fire. And it's on his watch and it's his problem. But he doesn't get blamed either. And partly it may not be his fault, but partly he just got in there and everyone else is catching on fire. And so it's like, well, what are you going to do? People get hacked. And so we've accidentally kind of normalized this, the hacking is just, it's constant, it's ambient. And the people on the team, going back to this large unnamed company, we had a wiki page internally, the silly hat page. It was a picture. Every time you did something really stupid and brought down a majority or all of the infrastructure, you put on this silly hat, and it changed over time. One was like this jester hat, one was a propeller beanie. Everyone on the team had at least one picture on the page. And part of that, just these systems are super complicated. And if you're not working with them even if you are working with them for 10, 20 years, that's hard enough to manage everything and make sure everything's taken care of properly. But when you're bouncing around and you have that much churn where people are coming in every year or two, there's just no way to get a handle on that. And I think that's part of the problem. So yeah, train people, invest in your people, but also try to keep them. Try to keep them at your company for more than a year or two.
I don't know. I a little bit disagree. And the reason why is because I'll go back to the problem with leadership. If the chief information officer, information security officer was actually responsible in some sort of serious way, then they wouldn't be laughing at people taking pictures in silly hats and making that just like, haha, you messed something up. He'd be like, you made me lose my bends, and like he's going to roll out serious changes to policy, serious changes to process, and making sure that, maybe we need to revamp our hiring process. Maybe folks really need to be able to pass a certain certification before I can allow them to be considered for employment, before they even start the actual the interview process.
Oh, so you pulled out the C word, certification.
Well, no, hold on. I'm just saying, this is just step one. Step one, and I'm talking multiple layers of defense against getting the wrong people in there that would go on to wear a silly hat. To me, it's offensive. It's offensive to think that somebody could make that big of a blunder that affects that many people in a real way, and that the only recourse for that is that they have to put on a spinning top hat. And it gets a little bit of internal shame, to me, it's if you're going into security and you're taking people's livelihoods and you're taking their lives into your hand, that you need to take it seriously, and I understand there's a certain amount of levity at work, which lends itself to productivity. It lends itself to doing a better job. So you don't really want everything to be super serious all the time, but a breach is a super serious thing. That is something where everybody gets together, you do a post-mortem, and you figure out what happened, and you come up with a serious plan for that never to happen again. And to me, it seems like those post-mortem meetings need to be attended by the insurance rep. The person from that insurance company needs to be in on that conversation, and they're going to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether or not their plan for addressing this breach, addressing this blunder, is insurable. Because if it's not insurable, you need to go back to the damn drawing board. You might need to fire everybody that you actually have on that team and hire some new people, because it is unacceptable for you to affect people's, we're talking about people's real, actual lives here. We're talking about people who are having their companies shut down because of the PR that's involved with them having their data leaked when it wasn't when they put their trust in these larger companies to protect it for them. And those big companies, look at their advertisement, look at their marketing materials. They say, you can trust us. Well, if you say I can trust you and you broke and you ruined my business, I say that I'm owed compensation. I'm owed a massive amount of compensation for that.
Yeah.
So that's my position on this.
Well said. I fully agree. Now, I did want to before we go off here, give you one more opportunity to step on a LinkedIn landmine, Alexander, because certs came up. That's a common back and forth on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Do you want to step on that landmine, or do you want to skip it? I'm curious if there's any certifications, individual or corporate, that you feel strongly for or against. You could skip this too, because it's going to get you some flack.
No, it's fine. It's I mean, there is certification which is highly tied to compliance and insurance side of things. So if it's about getting the checkbox stuff, it doesn't mean that you're going to do the right thing. It's wrong. Now, I like the idea of certification over the business itself, that is going to show good practices. As you say, there is a lot of turnover in staff, and it should be the organization's responsibility to decide who they hire and who they can trust. Because all these certs, like cloud certification, it's also making machine for the cloud side, and I'm not a fan of these as I've been posting on that. I did the training like to apply to them because I don't see why I would pay them to show that I can use their stuff. That's too, I understand that point. Now, I understand that when I'm doing a job interview or being considered for a position in an organization, this organization want to make sure that I have the skills, and I have no issue facing some, advanced question interview with highly technical person that is in place and that represent the lead of the organization and the goal, and see if there is a match. But then if it is about, let's say, ISO 27001 certification for an organization to prove and make sure that you have all the processes in place to match the best practices, I think it's the right thing.
Okay.
And at some point, we should have some certification for the insurability of an organization, as long as the risk profile requires it. Again, if you're a marketing company, and let's assume that you are not going to hold any sensitive information, either because you transfer by using an organization that is certified, and then you don't yourself plan to keep them. You don't need them because you're only going to have on your stock material. You don't care. Now, if you place yourself into being in medical care or owning PII, profiling people, Facebook style, then you're accountable, and you will need the certification and accountability. So that will be my take. This is a rough live thinking. I think it's good because by experience, I've been into many requirement for either the federal requirement in the US market, or ISO certification, or some NIA. Nest. It's always good because when you go through these, it's actually pinpointing thing that you may not have thought about. Like, because you have your operation view, like operation team have their operation view, development team are their view, sales their stuff, and this kind of framework is a forced communication and connection between each department. So it's bringing a good thing because it allows each group to understand the mandatory requirement of each other, and they can actually act together toward a better security model for the security of the organization.
Interesting. Yeah, those are some good points, actually. I have not heard those particular points widely discussed with regard to certs, and I think those are some really interesting and important things to consider. So, good answer, man. You dodged the landmine and provided a good answer. I'm impressed.
Yeah, in terms of certifications, it seems like it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And it's certainly better than putting the fox in charge of the hen house, where you allow a company to set their own certifications, their own standards for their security. You need to have some kind, and I do believe that these certifications could go hand in hand with the insurability, and it should be based upon the risk assessment, like you were saying. If the worst case scenario of you having all of your data leaked out on the internet is that a bunch of people can see, some operational data that you used in order to display stuff on your webpage, it's no problem. If you're leaking personally identifiable information, that's a big problem. And if you're leaking like personal health information, that is a massively bad problem. And so I think that just as insurance companies do a risk assessment for everything that they're going to insure anyway, it doesn't matter what it is. Whether you're a driver, they're going to do a risk assessment on your driving record.
Yeah.
If you are somebody, it doesn't matter what you're insuring. They're going to do a risk assessment on it. They just need to be taught how to do a security risk assessment properly. And they need to have standards for that. Yeah. So this way they can say, well, you know what? I'm sorry, but you're uninsurable at this point because you don't meet these particular criteria based upon, what it is that you're wanting. You have to say, hey, insurance company, here's what we're planning on storing. And also, this is what we plan on storing, and this is what we are doing in order to protect that we are storing. And the insurance company then not only gets to make an initial assessment as to whether or not that is insurable to them, but they also get to perform regular audits to see whether or not you are sneaking in and adding more stuff that you are storing after that initial assessment. And I think that is what's it has to happen. This has to be an inevitability, because look at how much money these insurance companies are hemorrhaging due to breaches already. They are already paying out in the billions. And I think, Elio, you talk about, figures in the trillions in the future, and, it seems to me like this is an inevitability. We have to get to that point where the accountability hits everybody involved in the decision-making process right in the pocketbook.
Yeah. One thing I want to bring up, because we've talked about certifications, we've talked about risk assessments based on PII, PHI, all these different classes of information, and then, quote, not important information. And I think one thing that kind of falls through the cracks is it can be very difficult to determine whether a piece of information is actually sensitive, and that can actually change later. So, for instance, blast from the past, let me know if you guys remember this, I think it was about 10 years ago when I worked at said large company. There was a really bizarre security issue where, and I can't remember, so someone correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Apple and Amazon. And one of them was providing, like many companies do, they would show you, if you're logged into your account, the last 4 digits of your credit card. And the other one would show you the first 4 digits of your credit card. And together, either one by itself is not particularly sensitive. But if you got access to that person's password, because people reuse passwords, so email and password, probably the same for everything, and you logged into both, you now had half of their credit card number. And it wasn't that hard now to brute force the rest. And so there are things like that when we start correlating information, seemingly innocuous information. The other one is Facebook and all these quizzes like, oh, what's your favorite pet? Yeah, because that's not a security question that a ton of sites ask you. So finding out what information is actually sensitive is really tricky.
Also, in our chat, we have a viewer named That Your Fan, and he made the comment that it sounds like the way I was describing it, the insurance company guy is judge, jury, and executioner. And I want to clarify that I don't really see it that way. He might be the judge and he might be the jury, but the executioner should be, government fines. And, you'll have these massive legal ramifications to your company in which, if you were doing all the right things, then your insurance is actually the person that's going to put that block of wood into the guillotine and save you from being executed. They're the ones who are going to take the brunt of that, because you did do everything. You have been paying your premium, and they can actually negotiate on your behalf with this fining, entity, saying, look, they did everything that they were supposed to do. What more could they have done? And if there was something more that they could have done, they have to pay out, and then they have to update their standards based upon that. But, they are the judge. They are the judge that says, and I guess, yeah, they're the judge in sense of the insurance companies, because they're the ones who end up having to pay this out. They're the ones who need to be setting the standard, or at least agreeing to a standard, which is set by, very smart people who know, the right kinds of security standards to set. The jury is, the jury is really the legal system. The legal system is going, there's going to be a suit filed against these companies in the case of a breach. And in a court of law, they're going to go through the regular legal system to determine, has there been a breach of these standards, of these contracts that were signed. And if they were not breached, arguably nothing happens. But if something did happen, and it turns out that there was nothing more that that could reasonably be done about it, then then the insurance company ends up paying out, and then they end up they work. It's imperfect, but I think it's a lot better than what we have now. And I'm no expert on setting up these kinds of things. I'm not setting these standards or these processes. This is just a suggestion, but I do think that it sounds to me a lot better than what is essentially companies getting away with all of this right now. Look, the alternative is that the people who are responsible for it put on a stupid hat and get a picture taken of them on an internal company network.
Yeah, that's working really well. So I do want to make sure, is there anything else? Because we ran over a little while ago, but this has been a really good conversation. There's been some stuff that Alexandre has said that's like, wow, that aspect, I hadn't considered that aspect of it. So any last thoughts, any other stuff you want to go over that we didn't already cover? Yeah, what else do you want to share?
Well, we did cover a lot of things, and I think that we should be open to discussion. Criticism is right, and when we all have point of views, and you see in that exchange, we all three had different approaches, and it's very constructive. It's waking up ideas and approach that we didn't think about. And while we have our base, I have mine, usual rant and stuff, but we should remain open to discussion and see where this can actually lead. We have to be smart, because right now no one came with something suitable, so it's an open discussion, and we got to find something, because for the future generation we cannot leave that thing in the current state, and so we have to find a proper balance, something relatively safe that allow innovation but at the same time protect people. And things are not going to slow down. We're going to have more connected things, and from strong leaks and breaches, we can have like industrial control system connected online with strong impact on human life, and that side is going to grow. So the sooner we address these requirements and the change, because change is taking a long time, the better it's going to be. And there's a Chris Roberts always saying that we need casualties to have a change to happen. So I don't want to reach that point. We know there's a problem, and despite the ones that are very comfortable in their position right now, this cannot stay like that. It's not okay. So yeah, that's the final point.
Yeah,
on my side.
I think that one thing that may actually push us, interestingly, to protocols versus cloud is, and this we'll probably have to cover in detail in another episode for time, but Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in America if that gets struck down, we had similar stuff that took away some of the liability shield for Backpage, which was really interesting. I can't remember if that was Mike Masnick or Mike Godwin talked about. Yeah, Backpage was a cesspool of all kinds of awful stuff, but it was a great intelligence source where like really truly awful human trafficking rings, they would find the intel that would lead the authorities to be able to actually shut down these rings that were the worst. And then they passed this legislation a few years ago that that got rid of that. And the Backpage basically shut down overnight. Several different sites just disappeared. And unfortunately, it doesn't mean the problem went away, but the visibility into that went away.
No.
And it was actually really a bad thing. And so Section 230 is that shield saying if you're operating a platform like Facebook, just any large site with Facebook, Google, et cetera, and someone does something illegal on your site, then you as the site operator, as the platform operator, are not held criminally liable. That it's the person using the platform that's liable. And the Trump administration, which is coming to an end here, they've been going after that really hard, trying to get rid of Section 230. And I don't know if it's going to end when we switch to our new administration. It may fall. And Mike Masnick, I think it was Masnick. Yeah, he had a really good article called "So You've been referred here because you think you thought some incorrect things about Section 230," and it's really, really good overview of just all the aspects. But as much as it seems like we're kind of giving a free pass to these not cloud operators, but platforms, if we get rid of that, it is not viable at all. Because when Dallas talks about holding to account these people, the top tier people, they're not going to be willing to go to prison because one person posted a nutty thing on a platform with 2 billion people. That's going to happen. And that, ironically, as terrible as that would be if that got repealed, because it would just shut down almost any platform, it just would be non-viable at that point with more than a handful of users. That might be what actually pushes us into full distributed systems where there is no centralized server that one person or one group is responsible for. And everyone just, each machine is its own little node in a decentralized network that you're just running your software. It's like Napster, it's like Nutella, and therefore you're the only one who actually could have criminal liability because there is no central clearinghouse. So anyway, that'll be interesting to watch.
It is very interesting also that, last night we actually watched the congressional hearings with Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey going, up to Congress and speaking to them about Section 230. And both Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, answered in the affirmative that they believe that Section 230 ought to be reformed. And that was very interesting to me. And I guess that's sort of an open-ended invitation. It could be, hey, let's reform it so it's even more protective, so I guess that could be their position. But I did find it interesting that neither of them were satisfied with Section 230 as it currently is written. So I suppose it'd be great to get somebody on here who actually, really knows what could be improved in Section 230. So this way we can have, I don't even know. I don't know what needs to be improved for Section 230, but it does sound like some of the industry leaders are, in favor of going that direction. But folks, this brings us to the end of our program tonight. Alexander, I want to thank you very much for coming on to the show. You are a wealth of information for cloud and security-related, issues. I thought coming into this conversation that we were going to, somehow arrive at the conclusion that the cloud is bad and we should be going back to, hosting things ourselves. And it turned out to be a much more sobering and complicated conclusion, which is that the state of our industry is it's very wrong, and we have some major problems which are significantly impacting people's lives right now, and that this is not a light conversation or a light topic. This isn't something where we're talking in abstracts about only large companies. We are talking about individuals and people's lives being seriously impacted in a lot of cases, and the need for some direction, some leadership, and ingenuity, innovation to solve these problems, because for every minute that these go unsolved, there are more victims out there who are going to have their lives, impacted or even ruined.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you very much. I've really, really enjoyed for the last, I don't know if it's been a year or what, I'm trying to remember how long that I've been watching your post on LinkedIn. I'm like, man, that guy's pretty sharp. He's got some good stuff. But wow, far and above, you exceeded. Like, getting to actually talk to you and really pick your brain is just phenomenal. Like, I always love conversations where I feel like I come away even smarter and I get to borrow a little bit of your brain power. This did not disappoint. I'm hoping we can do this again at some point and continue the discussion, because I feel like I have a lot more to learn from you.
Oh yeah, we can cover many topics. I mean, all the technology stuff, fun, and it's cool because some just stop at the first catchphrase about the shortening the thinking on that, but there is much more to speak about, and no one takes the time to think. So I use a shortcut to raise a warning. But the discussion it's just starting. I mean, it's complex, it's huge, it's society, technology, future, next generation. So we have to speak about that. And I'm glad you had the patience as well to listen to what I had to say. And it's good to be invited, because then people can also see that there is more than just the ranting in front. That's just my way to raise the concern on the issue.
It's funny you use the word patience, because this was great. I wish we could go even longer, but like I said, we'll do some more. Like I just so much good stuff here, so many more things to explore. Yeah, keep up the good work. I'll back you up on LinkedIn. I've been loving the posts, and I think that is the one good takeaway here is that as bad as the industry, as bad as shape we're in many ways technologically, and just there's kind of a health of the industry thing. It's not good right now. As DC mentioned, I really do think that we have wonderful people like yourself, Alexandre, and Chris Roberts. And we don't have time to list everyone. There's some really good people, even just on LinkedIn and then in the broader industry. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's people. We just have to figure out how to get the knowledge out there, and how to find out kind of how to meet people in the middle and let them do what needs to be done. Get them to understand why it needs to be done, and then fix what's preventing them from doing what needs to be done. I think we'll be in good shape.
And on that note, Alexandre, if you'd like to quickly, let's plug, the websites you'd like to direct people to if they'd like to hear more from you, and also plug anybody else that you think would be a great, a great resource for others to be following.
Well, that's on my side, mainly posting on LinkedIn. I do sometimes post on my own blog on the side, but it's more like technical tweaks and stuff because I'm, Linux passionate and virtualization stack stuff. My lab thing. But for all the awareness, security topics and stuff, I know it's a good platform, so I post on LinkedIn. It's also on my Twitter account, but it doesn't sound very good in English. @Trésrenours. It's in French. It means like very big bear, but which would be me. But yeah. So on my side, mainly LinkedIn to reach out. That's my playground right now. This is where I could get biggest impact alone, and I'm really happy because I met you. I met so many people, and I mean, speaking about the issue on a broader scope, it's already part of the solution. So I'm already super happy with that. So yeah, that's it. Just get in touch on LinkedIn.
All right,
Alexandre Blanc, cybersecurity. That's me.
All right, well, we'll get your links. We'll get your links and put those into the show notes on YouTube, and that'll make it so that, folks who don't speak French will be able to click on that and go straight over there. But yeah,
yes, sorry.
Alexandre Blanc, thank you very much for being on the show. We hope to have you again.
I will enjoy that.
All right. Thank you, Alexandre. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you for being part of the first interview show of Code and Chaos. We are going to be changing our recording schedule coming up here. We're going to be moving to 3 episodes per week, and we are not streaming live on YouTube anymore. We are going to actually record these episodes, put together the right kinds of show notes and links and citations, things like that, or sightings, and then we're going to put together, all the information we need, so this way it'll be supplemented properly. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be recording on Saturdays and 2 other days, which we're going to post pretty soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.